I stood at my own dining table, carving the turkey I'd basted since sunrise, and realized not a single person in the room remembered how many years I'd done it. My daughter scrolled through her phone. My son smiled politely. Not one asked about the lace runner I'd ironed, or the stories I always told, or why my voice had gone quiet. "Just eat, Mom," my daughter said, like I was background noise to a holiday she'd already rewritten. After 31 years of setting the table, I finally understood. I was the centerpiece they never noticed. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The turkey had been carved, the candles burned low, and laughter was supposed to be the soundtrack. Instead, it was the clinking of forks against china that filled Elaine Morrow's dining room, steady, polite, and hollow. Her house had always carried the scent of comfort this time of year. Rosemary, butter, and sweet potatoes caramelizing in the oven. The same table, the same lace runner she'd ironed every Thanksgiving for 31 years. Each chair had a history. Brent's wobbly one from his high school project, Kelsey's spot under the window where she once spilled cranberry sauce and cried about it. Elaine had started to tell that story. "You remember, Kelsey? Thanksgiving '92? You were trying to... Just eat, Mom." The words dropped like cold water across the table. Dylan's knife scraped his plate too loudly, and Brent looked down at his potatoes as if they might save him. Even the dog under the table went still. Elaine blinked once. Her voice, small and polite, disappeared somewhere behind her chest. She lifted her fork, but her appetite had already left the room. Kelsey pushed her wineglass slightly away. "We've heard the stories. Every year. Same ones. Let's just enjoy the meal, okay?" "Sure," Elaine said, though it came out thinner than she meant. The air seemed to shift, colder, sharper. She could feel Angela's eyes from across the table, the one guest who knew better than to speak now. Angela's eyebrow lifted, one half-sarcastic, half-concerned look that said everything without a sound. Elaine focused on her plate. Turkey, stuffing, green beans arranged too neatly. The flavors felt foreign, like someone else's cooking. "Mom, pass the rolls?" Brent asked softly. She passed them, carefully, silently. From the living room, the soft crackle of the fireplace tried to fill the silence. It couldn't. Dylan cleared his throat. "Everything's really delicious, Elaine." She gave a short nod. "Thank you, Dylan." The politeness made it worse. Across the table, Kelsey was already scrolling through her phone under the edge of the tablecloth, pretending she wasn't. Brent's hand twitched like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He never did. Elaine took another small bite of stuffing, chewing slowly, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. In her head, the story she hadn't finished still played. Tiny Kelsey, 5 years old, crying over spilled sauce, and Elaine teaching her that mistakes don't ruin a meal, they make it real. It was supposed to be a sweet memory, a reminder of grace. Now, even that felt taken. She folded her napkin carefully, smoothing it over and over until it looked like pressed linen again. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. "You okay, Mom?" Brent finally murmured. She smiled the way she'd learned to smile when the answer didn't matter. "Of course. Everything's fine." But something in her chest had shifted. A small click, quiet but final, like the sound of a door closing from the inside. Dinner wound down quickly after that. Kelsey collected plates in her usual efficient way, directing everyone like a hostess instead of a daughter. Dylan carried dishes, pretending not to notice the frost in the air. Brent helped where he could, his shoulders drawn in. When Angela stood to leave, she leaned down and whispered in Elaine's ear, You good? Elaine looked toward the family portraits lining the wall, decades of birthdays, graduations, laughter frozen in perfect squares. She nodded once, more to the pictures than to her friend. I'm fine, she said again. But as the front door shut behind them all and the silence returned, Elaine stayed standing in the middle of her kitchen. The leftover gravy cooled in the pan. Candle wax had dripped down the holder, pooling like tears she hadn't given herself permission to shed. She looked at the table one last time, the same table that had carried every Thanksgiving since she bought the house on Maple Crest Drive. 31 years of stories, 31 years of keeping them alive. This time, there had been no story, just quiet. Elaine turned off the lights, her own reflection caught in the window pane, still, composed, and strange to herself. She whispered, so softly even she could barely hear it. Just eat, Mom. Her hand tightened on the edge of the counter. Then she released it, straightened her back, and let the silence settle around her like a decision already made. Morning came without asking permission. The light through the kitchen blinds was thin and colorless, touching everything in quiet apology, the sink stacked with rinsed glasses, the folded tablecloth still holding a faint scent of butter and rosemary. Elaine stood barefoot on the cold tile floor, staring at the empty chairs as if they might still remember what had been said. They didn't, of course. Chairs never did. She poured coffee into her favorite mug, white porcelain with a tiny chip on the rim, and set it on the counter. The house, once full of warmth and motion, now hummed with a different kind of stillness, the kind that follows realization. Upstairs, she moved room to room, not cleaning so much as touching, curtains she'd sewn herself, picture frames that tilted slightly to one side, the faint groove in the hallway where Brent's toy truck had chipped the baseboard. The home felt smaller today, like it was holding its breath along with her. In the living room, sunlight fell over a row of photo albums. She hesitated, then opened one. Pages turned softly, Kelsey in pigtails holding a papier-mâché turkey, Brent in overalls clutching a pumpkin bigger than his head, Elaine in the background, younger, smiling without effort. She ran a thumb across their faces. It didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like evidence. Kelsey's words from last night replayed. Sharp, dismissive, slicing through memory like a knife through lace. Just eat, Mom. Elaine closed the album. The sound of it shutting felt final. She stood still for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator the only thing daring to move. Then she walked to her study, the room that had always been hers alone. She pulled open the bottom drawer of the old oak desk and retrieved a narrow manila envelope. Her will, her deed, and 31 years of ownership folded neatly inside. Her hands didn't shake when she reached for the phone. Simon Clark, attorney, came the familiar voice, calm and measured. Simon, she said quietly. Do you still handle real estate? A pause. Then, warm recognition. Elaine Morrow. It's been a while. Absolutely, I do. Want to talk in person? She looked around her house. The warm tones, the scuffed floors, the laughter fossilized in the walls, and felt something strange. Not sadness, not anger. Something closer to release. Yes, she said. I think I do. They set a time. Saturday morning. His tone stayed professional, but she could hear a note of curiosity, as if he already sensed there was a story beneath her calm. There always was. After hanging up, she stood in front of the safe in her bedroom closet. It was old, metal gray, the kind of thing her late husband had insisted they needed for emergencies. Elaine spun the dial, pressed her ear to the door, and opened it with the same precision she once reserved for grading essays. Inside, insurance papers, tax forms, a small stack of family photos bound with ribbon. On top of it all, the deed. She lifted it out carefully. The paper was crisp, The ink faded at the edges. Her name, Elaine S. Morrow, was written in bold across the top. Her life's stability in a single document. Beside it sat a tiny pair of white leather baby shoes. Brent's. They were soft and worn, the laces yellowed with time. She hadn't realized she'd kept them here. For a long while, she just stared. Every memory of raising her children alone seemed to rise from that small pair of shoes. The scraped knees, the late-night homework, the endless stretch of days when love had to outweigh exhaustion. She reached out, touched the toe of one shoe, then took a slow breath. "You outgrew everything," she whispered. "Even me." The house gave no answer. Elaine went to the linen closet, found an old cardboard box, and lined it with the tissue paper. She placed the shoes inside gently, as if setting something fragile to rest. One by one, other small things joined them. A drawing Brent made in second grade, a chipped ornament Kelsey had once crafted from popsicle sticks, a photo of the three of them at Lake Harriet, sunburned and smiling. She closed the box and sealed it with a single strip of tape. By the time she carried it downstairs, the sunlight had shifted, filling the kitchen with a warm, amber glow. It caught the edge of her reflection in the window, her posture straighter, her face unreadable. Elaine set the box beside the door and reached for her keys. She didn't know where she'd put it yet. Storage, charity, maybe Angela's spare room. But she knew it wouldn't stay here. Not anymore. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kelsey. "Thanks again for dinner. Food was great. No apology, no acknowledgement, just efficiency." Elaine stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without replying. The coffee on the counter had gone cold. She took one sip anyway, grimaced, and set the mug in the sink. Then, as if on cue, the silence wrapped around her again. Soft, deliberate, almost comforting. She looked toward the front door, where the morning light pooled across the hardwood. Her fingers brushed the edge of the deed still in her hand. Something had begun moving inside her, a quiet, irreversible momentum. The kettle whistled low and steady, a quiet summons in an otherwise uneventful morning. Elaine let it sing a little longer than usual, just to fill the silence. The house still smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted vegetables, ghosts of Thanksgiving clinging to the walls. Angela arrived without knocking, as always, her bakery apron still dusted with flour, a streak of chocolate on her wrist. "You're making tea? That means you're brooding." Elaine poured hot water into two mismatched mugs and set them on the table. "Brooding," she repeated with a half smile, "or thinking." "Same thing when you do it," Angela said, sliding into a chair. "So, you called me over for what? Post-holiday therapy or something stronger?" Elaine sat across from her, hands wrapped around her cup. Steam rose between them, curling like smoke from an old fire. "I'm fine," she began, then corrected herself. "Actually, I'm tired." Angela raised a brow. "Of what?" Elaine's gaze drifted toward the dining room doorway. From here, she could still see the edge of the table where Kelsey had sat, back straight, voice sharp. "Of being edited out of my own life." Angela didn't interrupt. She never did when something real was about to surface. Elaine went on, voice calm but tight. "You know what she said last night. Just eat, Mom. Like my stories were, noise. Like everything I've lived through is some background static." Angela snorted. "She treats you like a podcast she didn't click on." Elaine almost laughed. It came out as a soft exhale through her nose. "That's exactly it. She doesn't want to listen, but she still wants to look like the kind of daughter who does." Angela leaned forward, chin on her palm. "So what are you going to do? Because I've seen that look before. The last time you had it, you refinanced your mortgage behind your ex-husband's back and came out richer for it." Elaine's lips curved faintly. That was strategy, not spite. Angela chuckled. And now? Elaine stood, crossed to the sideboard, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a worn file folder labeled in neat cursive, "If I ever leave." She set it on the table between them. Angela tilted her head. "Oh, that sounds dramatic. My kind of folder." Elaine opened it slowly. Inside were documents organized with surgical precision: living will, power of attorney, property history, notarized forms dating back decades. It looked less like preparation and more like prophecy. "I started it after the divorce," Elaine said. "Just in case. I kept it updated every few years." Angela scanned the pages, her eyes widening. "You've had this sitting around all this time? Most people keep recipes or love letters in drawers, not a full exit plan." "I like being ready." Angela laughed softly, the kind of laugh that came with admiration. "You were always 10 steps ahead. Even when life blindsided you, you already had an umbrella." Elaine stirred her tea absent-mindedly, spoon clinking against porcelain. "It's funny. I used to think being prepared would keep me from ever feeling powerless again. But last night, I realized preparation means nothing if you never use it." Angela leaned back, studying her. "You're not just talking about paperwork." "No," Elaine said simply. "I'm not." Outside, a car door slammed, distant but sharp. They both glanced toward the window where the street shimmered in the weak November sunlight. Elaine's house looked picture-perfect from the outside. Suburban comfort, nothing more. Angela lowered her voice. "So what's the next step, then?" Elaine took a sip of tea, the liquid now just warm enough to taste the faint bitterness of the leaves. She set the cup down, gaze steady. "I already called Simon." Angela blinked. "Your lawyer?" Elaine nodded. "We're meeting Saturday. I want to talk options." Angela's grin softened into something more serious. "You mean it this time?" "I do." They sat in silence for a long moment, the kind that needed no words. The tea cooled. The clock on the mantel ticked like a metronome counting down to change. Finally, Angela reached over and touched Elaine's hand. "Whatever you're planning, don't do it out of anger. Do it because you're ready to stop waiting for someone to listen." Elaine looked at her, eyes clear, voice low but certain. "I'm not angry. I'm awake." The kettle clicked off behind them, its job long done. Angela smiled faintly, the corners of her eyes softening. "Then, my friend, I think your story just got interesting." Elaine's reply was quiet, almost lost in the stillness. "It's about time." The appraiser's car was a muted silver sedan that looked as forgettable as the man who stepped out of it. "A necessity," Simon had said. "You don't want a parade of people poking around if you value privacy." Elaine had agreed. Privacy had become her new currency. She greeted him with polite warmth, ushering him inside the house she'd curated for 31 years. The smell of baked scones still lingered from the batch Angela had dropped off that morning. "Take your time," Elaine said, gesturing to the staircase, the hardwood floors, the sunroom with the skylight she'd added 5 summers ago. He nodded, clipboard in hand, and began his quiet circuit, tapping, measuring, scribbling notes with a kind of reverent efficiency. Elaine stood by the front window, hands clasped, watching the slow dance of afternoon light through the trees outside. The maple leaves had already fallen, revealing thin, reaching branches that looked both exposed and unafraid. She knew the feeling. When the appraiser finally turned back to her, he was smiling faintly. "You've maintained this place beautifully, Mrs. Morrow. I'll have my report to your attorney by the end of the day, but based on the upgrades, I'd estimate around 540. Elaine blinked. 540,000? He nodded. "You chose your renovations wisely. Kitchens and bathrooms sell houses, you've got both shining." She almost laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. $540,000. For walls she'd painted herself. For rooms that had once echoed with her children's laughter. For a life she was quietly dismantling. "Thank you," she said, her voice composed. When he left, she closed the door slowly, letting the click of the latch settle in the air like punctuation. Then she called Simon. He answered on the second ring. "Elaine, just got the appraisal notice. Congratulations. It's a strong number." "What's next?" she asked. He hesitated. "We keep this quiet. No open houses, no listing signs. I'll find a buyer through private channels, a pocket listing. It's discreet and clean." Elaine smiled faintly. "Discreet suits me fine." Simon paused again, his tone softer now. "You sure you don't want to tell your family yet? It might—" "No," she interrupted gently. "I want to do this on my own timeline. My story, remember?" There was a short silence before he said, "Understood." By the time dusk began to fold over Minneapolis, Angela was at her doorstep with 2 cardboard boxes and a roll of packing tape. "Operation Clean Sweep," she announced, stepping inside like she'd been recruited for battle. They worked side by side in the fading light, Angela wrapping dishes in newspaper, Elaine sorting photographs into labeled envelopes. Kelsey's early years, Brent's college, vacations, 1990s. The sound of tape pulling free echoed softly through the quiet rooms. At one point, Angela held up an old snow globe from a family trip to Chicago. "Still works," she said, shaking it so flakes drifted over a tiny skyline. Elaine smiled. "Barely." "You sure about this?" Angela asked. "You're really ready to let go?" Elaine ran her hand along the box of framed photos, the corners worn smooth from years of dusting. "Letting go," she said, "feels different than I thought. It's not grief. It's clearing space." Angela nodded, her eyes soft. "That's how freedom sounds, honey." They worked until the clock struck 10. The house looked different now. Echoing, unburdened, almost unfamiliar. Elaine stood in the center of her living room, surrounded by neat towers of boxes, and felt the strange electric calm of a woman who had crossed an invisible threshold. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up and saw Kelsey's name glowing on the screen. "Kelsey, when are we decorating your house for Christmas?" The text was cheerful, oblivious, automatic, like every other message from her daughter. Elaine read it twice, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then she typed, "I'll let you know." She set the phone face down on the counter and stared out the window. Snow had started to fall, a soft, early dusting that covered the porch steps in white. Angela came to stand beside her, cradling a mug of leftover tea. "You okay?" Elaine didn't answer right away. She just watched the snow build layer by layer, each flake erasing what came before. Finally, she said quietly, "This house has carried enough stories. It's time it carried someone else's." Angela nodded, but Elaine didn't see her. Her reflection in the glass was enough. A woman still, resolute, no longer waiting to be heard. The email came in just after dawn, a subject line so plain it almost disappeared among grocery coupons and weather alerts. "Offer received, Maple Crest Property." Elaine clicked it open without hesitation. Simon's message was brief, businesslike, strong cash offer. Buyer wants a quick close, 30 days, full price, no contingencies. Her heart didn't race. It didn't even stutter. It simply steadied. She read the message twice, then opened the attached document. Signatures, figures, a new set of names that would soon replace her own on the deed she'd once thought permanent. For 31 years, that address had been synonymous with her identity. Now it was just an asset on paper. Elaine pressed a hand against her chest, not out of sentiment, but to feel something solid beneath the calm. She dialed Simon. "Morning, Elaine," he greeted, sounding alert and quietly pleased. "I got your email," she said. "Let's move forward." "You're sure?" I was sure the moment she told me to stop talking. There was a pause. Then Simon's voice softened. "All right. I'll schedule closing for the 14th. That gives us 30 days. I'll handle the paperwork. You start thinking about next steps. Storage. Temporary housing." "I'll figure it out," she said, eyes flicking to the living room, where half-packed boxes sat like silent witnesses. After the call, she texted Angela. "It's happening. 30 days." Within 15 minutes, there was a knock on her door. Angela didn't bother with greetings. She walked straight in, eyes wide. "You actually did it. Holy hell, Elaine, you really did it." Elaine handed her the printed offer sheet, the numbers crisp and undeniable. Angela whistled. 540,000, cash. No inspection drama. "Girl, this is divine intervention." Elaine smiled faintly. Or divine punctuation. They stood together in the quiet house. Outside, the snow had hardened into a glimmering crust over the lawn. Inside, dust motes danced in the light pouring through the big bay window, a window she'd cleaned before every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every first day of school. Angela placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're staying with me for a bit, right? The guest room's ready. I even washed the extra quilt." Elaine nodded. "I won't be in the way?" "Please," Angela scoffed. "You'll be the most interesting thing that's happened to that room since the cat got stuck under the bed." That made Elaine laugh, a small, startled sound that felt strange in her throat after so many days of quiet resolve. That evening, she descended into the basement with a box cutter and a flashlight. The air was cool and familiar, faintly scented with detergent and concrete. Her footsteps echoed softly as she opened bins she hadn't touched in years. Brent's college textbooks, Kelsey's cheer trophies, the camping gear her ex had sworn they'd use every summer. She began sorting methodically. Keep, donate, discard. Her movements were deliberate, almost meditative. There was peace in the practicality. Halfway through, she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Mom?" Elaine turned, startled. Brent stood halfway down, his hands in his jacket pockets, an uncertain smile on his face. "I knocked, but you didn't hear me," he said. "Angela said you were cleaning out." Elaine gestured to the mess around her. "Trying to make space. You know me." Brent's eyes moved across the basement, landing on the now empty bookshelves against the far wall. "Where'd all the books go?" "Oh, I donated most of them," she said easily. He frowned slightly. "That's a lot? Even the first editions? You love those." Elaine met his gaze evenly. "I did. But love changes shape sometimes." He hesitated, sensing the edges of something he didn't understand. "Everything okay?" She smiled, soft, calm, unflinching. "Better than okay." He looked at her for a long moment, as if waiting for a real answer. But Elaine had already turned back to the boxes, cutting open another one with quiet precision. Eventually, he sighed and said, "Well, if you need help moving anything, call me, all right?" "I will," she said. When he left, his footsteps faded up the stairs and out the front door. The silence returned, thick and purposeful. Elaine exhaled slowly, her breath visible in the cool air. From the corner of the basement, she picked up one last object, a small framed photo of the house taken the week she bought it. The siding looked new, the yard smaller, her younger self standing proudly on the porch steps with both kids beside her. She traced the edge of the frame with her thumb, then placed it gently into the keep box. Her phone buzzed again upstairs. She climbed the steps, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Kelsey." Can we do the tree next weekend? The kids are asking. When are we decorating your house for Christmas? Elaine stood still at the top of the stairs, the glow from her phone reflecting in her eyes. Then she typed, "I'll let you know." She set the phone down beside the sink, looked around her half-empty home, and whispered to herself, "Not this Christmas." The phone call came while Elaine was loading the trunk of her car with boxes marked "Donate." The December wind bit through her gloves, but she didn't mind the cold. It made her feel awake. "Mom?" Kelsey's voice was bright, performative, the way it got when she was halfway between genuine concern and social obligation. "I drove by earlier. Your curtains are gone. What's happening over there?" Elaine shut the trunk gently. "Just cleaning out clutter." "Clutter?" Kelsey's laugh was light but edged. "You've had that same living room setup since before I got married." "What? Did you wake up minimalist?" "I'm making space," Elaine said evenly, locking the car. There was a pause, then the sound of a car blinker on the other end. Kelsey multitasking as usual. "Do you want me to come help? We could go through things together. Make it fun." Elaine smiled faintly to herself. "That's kind, but no. I've got it handled." "Mom." "I'm fine, Kelsey," she said. Softer now, but final. Truly. When the call ended, Elaine stood there for a moment in her driveway, the silence stretching around her like fresh snow. She could still hear the echo of her daughter's confusion, but it didn't sting this time. It simply drifted away. Later that afternoon, Angela pulled up in her bakery van, the back seat full of coffee and sarcasm. She hopped out, glancing at the piles by the garage. "You're really doing it," she said, pulling her scarf tighter. "You're purging your life like it's bad inventory." Elaine opened the passenger door for her. "Less mess, fewer ghosts." Angela grinned, passing her a cup of hot coffee. "You're enjoying this. Admit it." Elaine arched a brow. "Enjoying what?" "Watching them wonder what you're up to. I've known you long enough to recognize that little spark. You look like a woman halfway through a good secret." Elaine chuckled, a sound that carried more warmth than she intended. "Maybe. Maybe my ass," Angela muttered, helping her lift another box into the car. "I hope I get front row seats to the reveal." By evening, the two of them stood in the back lot of the neighborhood donation center. A young attendant came out to help unload, but Elaine waved him off. "I've got it," she said, lifting each box with a deliberate steadiness. Old linens, holiday decor, books, her children's forgotten artwork. When the last box was gone, Elaine lingered for a second, eyes on the loading dock. It felt like dropping anchors one by one until all that was left was movement. Angela watched her. "You okay?" Elaine nodded. "I thought I'd feel empty, but I don't." Angela smiled. "You let go of stuff. You didn't let go of yourself." The next day, Brent came by with his pickup truck. He stood in the doorway, holding 2 storage totes. "Simon told me you're putting some things away," he said carefully, as if stepping into a conversation already halfway over. Elaine motioned for him to come in. "Just temporary," she said. "Angela's letting me store a few boxes at her place." Brent nodded, eyes scanning the stripped-down living room. "Looks weird in here. You sure you're not overdoing it?" She shrugged lightly. "You know me. Once I start organizing, it becomes a sport." He smiled a little, but his expression carried the same quiet unease as before. He didn't ask the real question, "Why now?" And Elaine didn't volunteer the answer. They worked in near silence, carrying boxes from the basement to the truck. Brent's movements were efficient, almost cautious, like he was afraid to break the spell his mother was under. When the last box was loaded, he wiped his hands on his jeans. "You really don't need help with whatever this is?" Elaine looked at him, the softer eyes, the hesitant way he hovered. Wanting to help, but unsure how. She stepped forward and hugged him, arms tight, lingering just long enough for him to notice something different in it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me," she said. "Even when you don't understand." He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, awkward and gentle. "I'll come by tomorrow, maybe help finish the basement." "That'd be nice," she said. But she knew by tomorrow the basement would be empty. As his truck pulled away, Elaine leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching the taillights fade down Maple Crest Drive. The house behind her was quiet, too quiet for a place still technically hers. The moonlight spilled through the window, catching the edge of the signed paperwork lying on the counter. The buyers' names glowed faintly in the pale light, as though already claiming their space. Elaine turned off the lights, one by one, until only the living room lamp remained. The same lamp she'd read bedtime stories by, the one Kelsey had once called old-fashioned. She ran a hand along its brass stem, then switched it off. Darkness settled, familiar, yet thrilling. The locksmith's van pulled into Elaine's driveway just after sunrise, the sky still streaked in pink and gold. The man stepped out, young and polite, a small jingling of metal tools at his belt. "Mrs. Morrow?" he asked. Elaine nodded, holding the door open. "Yes. The locks on all exterior doors, please. I'd like new keys before noon." He smiled, professional but curious. "Sure thing. Security concern?" "Something like that," she said. While he worked, she walked through the house one last time, coffee in hand, the scent of varnish and old wood still thick in the air. The rooms looked stripped, but not sad, like a stage after the play had ended, waiting for the next story to move in. She paused in the living room, eyeing the bowl by the front door that had, for decades, held extra keys. There they were, the silver one Kelsey had insisted on years ago, in case of emergency, and the faded brass copy Brent had used in college. Elaine picked them up, turning them in her palm. How many times had those keys been borrowed, lost, or used to enter her home without knocking? When the locksmith handed her the new set, sleek, gold, unmarked, she slipped them into her pocket. "Keep the old ones," she told him. "Melt them down if you want." He laughed lightly, unsure if she was joking. "All set, ma'am. You're locked up tight now." "Good," Elaine said. "Exactly how I want it." By mid-morning, the house was ready for its final act. The counters were bare. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and closure. Elaine placed the envelope of closing documents neatly on the kitchen island, next to a single tulip in a vase. A quiet farewell to herself. Then she left. Angela's bakery was already busy when she arrived, the air rich with sugar and espresso. Her best friend was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, mid-laughter with a customer. The moment Angela saw her, she waved her over. "You're just in time," Angela said. "Brunch is warming in the back. I told the staff we're celebrating your escape." "My what?" Elaine smiled, hanging her coat on the rack. "Your bon voyage brunch, obviously. You can't sell a house and not get a croissant send-off. It's practically law." In the back room, a small table had been set with coffee, pastries, and flowers from Angela's shop window. No big speeches, no fuss, just warmth, the kind that expected nothing. Elaine sat, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Simon's finalizing everything today," she said. "The funds should clear by tomorrow." Angela raised her cup. "To clean exits and messy freedom." Elaine clinked hers gently. "To quiet victories." They ate slowly, talking about nothing and everything. The bakery's new menu, the latest city snowfall, a book Elaine had once meant to teach, but never did. There was laughter, easy and unforced. When brunch ended, Elaine pulled a small envelope from her purse and slid it across the table to Angela. "Can you give this to Simon when you see him next? It's a donation check. I want part of the sale to go to the literacy nonprofit downtown. You know, the one that helps adults get their GEDs. Angela blinked, then grinned. You're really closing every loop, aren't you? I taught words my whole life, Elaine said. Seems fitting to leave a few behind for someone else to find. Angela squeezed her hand. You're something else, Elaine Morrow. Elaine smiled. I know. That afternoon, Brent texted her. Brent. Mom, Simon just called me about forwarding some mail. Wait, are you moving? Elaine sat in her car, parked outside what would be Angela's spare room for the next few weeks. The cold light made her windshield shimmer. She typed back, deliberate and calm. Already did. She turned off her phone. By evening, she returned to Maple Crest Drive one last time. The house sat quiet beneath a dusting of snow, golden light from the street lamps pooling across the porch. She let herself in with the new key just once, to check the thermostat, to breathe the air of her old life one more time. The silence greeted her like an old friend. She walked to the front door, set the old spare keys, Kelsey's and Brent's, on the counter, and exhaled. You can have the house, she murmured, but not the hold. With that, she stepped outside and closed the door. The new lock clicked shut behind her. Final, perfect, irrevocable. The first call came at 9:07 a.m., sharp, insistent, and expected. Elaine didn't move. She sat at Angela's kitchen table wrapped in a wool cardigan, hands curled around a mug of steaming tea. Outside, Minneapolis was blanketed in pale sunlight, the kind that makes snow look like glass. The phone buzzed again. Kelsey, mobile. Elaine turned it face down on the table. By the third call, she muted it. Angela emerged from the bakery kitchen in a cloud of cinnamon and chatter, setting down a plate of freshly baked scones. That thing hasn't stopped singing since breakfast. You gonna answer it or let her combust? I'm leaning toward combustion, Elaine said softly. Angela grinned. You always did prefer natural consequences. The fourth call came while they ate, Kelsey's name lighting the screen like a siren. Elaine ignored it again. When the voicemail icon appeared, she finally listened, pressing the phone to her ear like a scientist examining a specimen. Kelsey's voice, sweetened to syrup, filled the room. Hey, Mom. I just noticed the house listing. I'm sure it's a mix-up. You didn't sell the place, right? I mean, you would have told us. Elaine deleted it. 2 minutes later, another message. This one sharper. Okay, seriously. What's going on? You can't just move and not say anything. That house is family property, Mom. You can't do that without talking to us. Angela raised an eyebrow. Family property? Did she pay the mortgage? Elaine smiled faintly. She once bought the Thanksgiving turkey. Maybe that counts. They shared a quiet laugh, the sound light enough to dissolve tension. A third message arrived not long after. The tone had shifted again. Half rage, half performance. This is insane. You've been acting weird for weeks. Dylan says I should drive over there, but apparently, you've changed the locks. What's gotten into you? Elaine placed the phone down and picked up her book instead, a worn copy of The Night Watchman. She began to read. The words came easily, like water finding its level. Angela leaned against the counter, dusting sugar over another batch of scones. You're really not going to answer, huh? Elaine turned a page. Why would I? She never listened when I spoke. Now she can hear the silence. The phone buzzed again, then again. 5 missed calls in total, each one leaving behind another message, each one climbing higher in pitch, tone, and panic. By the 5th, Kelsey's voice cracked. I don't understand you, Mom. You always have to make everything dramatic. You could have just talked to me instead of whatever this is, selling your home like it's some power move. What are you trying to prove? Elaine closed her eyes, the faintest smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Nothing, she murmured. Not a thing. Angela watched her for a beat, then slid a scone across the table. For strength, she said. Elaine took it, breaking it apart carefully. Butter melting in the steam. For peace, she replied. The kitchen was warm, alive with the smell of baked sugar and friendship. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering light flakes of snow against the window. When her phone finally rang again, it wasn't Kelsey. It was Brent. Elaine answered that one. Mom, Brent whispered, voice low, as if calling from a place he didn't want overheard. I just got off the phone with Kelsey. She's losing her mind. I imagined she might be, Elaine said, sipping her tea. You really sold it? He asked, awe creeping into his tone. I did. A quiet pause. Then, that was bold. Elaine looked toward the window, where sunlight fractured across the snowbanks. That, she said evenly, was overdue. Brent exhaled, the sound halfway between relief and admiration. You really don't care what she thinks, do you? I care that she learns, Elaine said, even if it's the hard way. He hesitated. You know she's going to call everyone. Make it sound like you've lost your mind. Let her, Elaine said. People love a story. She can have her version. After they hung up, the bakery quieted. Angela had stepped out front to help a customer, leaving Elaine alone with the scent of yeast and cinnamon. She scrolled through her phone, past the missed calls, the voicemails, the unanswered texts. Then the final one appeared. Kelsey, you betrayed us. Elaine read it twice, letting the words sit there, cold and brittle. Then she turned the phone face down, lifted her tea, and looked out at the snow. The street was still, the morning light clear and soft. The kind of quiet she'd spent years chasing. She exhaled slowly, a single word escaping under her breath. Finally. Brent arrived unannounced on a gray Saturday morning, a cardboard coffee tray balanced in one hand and confusion written all over his face. Angela's bakery was quiet before opening, the air still thick with the smell of warm butter and rising dough. Elaine sat at her usual corner table, flipping through a stack of papers. Morning, he said, setting the coffee down. I figured you'd be here. Elaine smiled faintly. You figured right. He hesitated, studying her. Kelsey's still calling everyone. She says you've lost it, that you're being impulsive. Elaine folded her reading glasses and set them aside. Impulsive, she echoed. That's one word for 31 years of thought. He sat down, uneasy but curious. So what's really going on, Mom? For a long moment, Elaine just looked at him, the boy who'd once built forts in her living room, the man who now flinched at conflict but never lost his kindness. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, neatly arranged, were several documents. Legal seals, signatures, a copy of her new will. Brent scanned the top page, brow furrowing. This says, the estate goes to the Minneapolis Literacy Coalition and Harvest Table Food Access Fund. Elaine finished for him. Every cent. He looked up sharply. Mom, that's everything. She nodded. The house is already sold. The proceeds will fund both programs in perpetuity. The rest? Savings, retirement accounts. Go there too. Brent sat back, silent for a beat. The coffee between them steamed softly. I thought you'd be angry, she said finally. He shook his head slowly. Honestly? I'm relieved. Elaine blinked. Not expecting that. Brent's mouth twitched into a tired smile. Kelsey's been waiting for the will her whole life, like it's a reward for endurance. It's exhausting, watching her measure love in assets. I'm glad you're ending that story. Elaine reached for his hand. You always understood the difference between what's earned and what's inherited. He squeezed her fingers gently. I learned it from you. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the bakery's refrigerators filled the quiet, steady, and reassuring. Angela's laugh drifted faintly from the kitchen, proof that life, unlike property, doesn't stop for anyone's permission. Then Brent asked, quietly, "Does Kelsey know yet?" Elaine's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Not yet, but she will soon enough." That afternoon, in an office overlooking the frozen river, Simon hit send. His email to Kelsey Ward was short and impeccably professional. Subject: Inquiry regarding your mother's estate. Mrs. Ward, your mother's affairs are entirely in order. She has made lawful, independent decisions regarding her property and finances. As her attorney of record, I can confirm all transactions were conducted willingly and transparently. I understand this news may be unexpected. However, there is no legal standing for contest at this time. Regards, Simon Clark, Esquiver. He leaned back, sighing through his nose. Then, almost to himself, muttered, "You did it, Elaine." Across town, in Angela's spare bedroom, Elaine's laptop pinged with an incoming email. She opened it to find Kelsey's name bold at the top, subject line screaming in capital letters, "This isn't over." The body of the message was a blur of fury. "I can't believe you'd cut your family out. After everything I've done for you. Dylan says you're not in your right mind. You need to fix this before it goes public." Elaine read the message once, then once more, slower. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. Then she closed the laptop instead. Outside, a soft snow was falling again, steady and unhurried. Angela appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of cocoa. "Let me guess, she's threatening to sue." Elaine chuckled quietly. "She already did. Simon sent her a very polite no." Angela grinned. "I'd pay good money to see her face when she read that." Elaine took the mug, the warmth seeping into her hands. "You don't have to," she said. "I've seen it enough times in my life to imagine it perfectly." She walked to the window, looking out at the pale Minneapolis skyline. For the first time in weeks, her chest felt light. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. 31 years, she murmured. And I finally get to breathe in my own house, even if it isn't mine anymore. Angela leaned on the doorframe, her voice soft. "You rewrote the ending, honey. That's what teachers do." Elaine smiled, watching the snow gather in gentle layers on the street below. The house looked different from the street. New curtains, a cheerful wreath on the door, and a young maple tree planted by the mailbox where her hydrangeas used to bloom. Elaine parked across the road, engine idling for a moment, her breath fogging the windshield. Angela sat in the passenger seat, camera dangling from her neck. "You sure about this?" Elaine nodded slowly. "It's time." She turned off the car and reached for the small box on her lap, a wooden one she'd refinished herself decades ago. Inside were handwritten recipe cards, each stained and creased with use. The apple pie Kelsey used to beg for, Brent's favorite chicken casserole, and the dinner rolls her students had once claimed were better than cafeteria gold. Tucked on top was a folded note. They walked up the shoveled path together, boots crunching against the snow. The windows glowed warm from within. Someone was baking. That made Elaine smile. The door opened before she could knock. A young woman, early 30s, bundled in a cardigan and apron dusted with flour, stood there, holding a wooden spoon like a nervous prop. "Mrs. Morrow?" she asked, recognition dawning. "I thought that was you. Please come in. The realtor told us you might stop by." Elaine stepped inside, greeted by the smell of cinnamon and sugar. Different recipe, same comfort. The house had changed, but still carried a pulse she recognized. The staircase gleamed. The old dining table was gone, replaced with something sleek and modern. Yet in the corner, by the window, stood her antique lamp, the one she'd left behind. It didn't match anything, the young woman said quickly, catching Elaine's gaze. But I couldn't bring myself to move it. It makes the room feel grounded. Elaine smiled, her throat tightening. It's a good lamp. Her husband appeared, tall and gentle-faced, wiping his hands on a dish towel. We've wanted to thank you, he said. The place has a soul. It doesn't feel like just a house. It never was, Elaine said softly. She handed the woman the wooden box. For you. The woman blinked, hesitant. Oh, no, we can't. Please, Elaine said, her voice steady but kind. It belongs here more than it does with me. The woman opened the lid, fingertips brushing across the handwritten cards. Her eyes filled before she'd even read the note. They're beautiful, she whispered. You wrote these all by hand. Everyone, Elaine said. The ink's probably half memories by now. The woman unfolded the note carefully. Elaine had written it the night before, her handwriting looping, certain. This home taught me that stories aren't told in words. They're cooked, sung, and laughed into walls. Make memories. Tell stories. Don't let silence take the table. Elaine Morrow. The woman pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. We'll keep telling them. Elaine nodded. That's all I wanted. She turned toward the door before emotion could break the surface. Angela followed, camera already raised. Hold still, she said softly. Elaine paused on the sidewalk, the winter light catching in her silver hair, the young family's laughter drifting faintly from the house behind her. Angela snapped the photo, one clean frame, a woman walking away from her past, head high, coat flaring in the wind. Perfect, Angela murmured. Elaine smiled. Don't make it sentimental. Too late, Angela said. You just gave away your history. That's prime sentimental content. Back in the car, Elaine opened her phone. The screen glowed with that photo. Angela had already sent it to her. Elaine stared at it for a long moment, her reflection overlapping the image. Then she opened her social media app, the one she rarely used, and typed a caption. 31 years in one house. Today, I left it behind. Some stories end quietly, and some feed the next chapter. She hit post. Angela peered over her shoulder. You just went viral with Grace, didn't you? Elaine chuckled, setting the phone down. Maybe this time, the story tells itself. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and endless. Elaine leaned back, watching it coat the windshield, her chest light with something she hadn't felt in years, something close to peace. The first snowstorm of December rolled in quietly, blanketing Minneapolis in white silence. The city lights shimmered beneath it like distant stars. Elaine sat at Angela's kitchen table, a soft flannel scarf wrapped around her shoulders, when her phone vibrated. Kelsey, you're still doing Christmas, right? Elaine looked at the message for a long moment. The words were ordinary, almost harmless. But underneath them, she could feel the assumption, the ritual expectation, the unspoken claim that her mother's house, her mother's labor, her mother's table would still be waiting. She typed back one sentence. Elaine, not this year. A small tremor of satisfaction ran through her fingers as she hit send. Then, before she could second-guess it, she turned off her phone and opened her laptop. The Lake Superior cabin rental site was already bookmarked from the week before. She scrolled through the photos, wood walls, a fireplace, a deck overlooking frozen water, and clicked Book Now. It was the first reservation she'd ever made without checking anyone's schedule but her own. When she told Angela that afternoon, her friend nearly dropped a tray of croissants. You're spending Christmas alone? By choice? Elaine smiled, stirring her tea. By intention. Angela leaned against the counter, wiping her hands. You sure you don't want company? I can close the bakery for a few days. Bring enough hot cocoa to last the apocalypse. Angela, Elaine said, amusement tugging at her lips. I love you, but this one's for me. Her friend sighed, mock dramatic. Fine. Just promise me you'll call if the solitude starts talking back. I'll send proof of life, Elaine replied, but only if I'm not too busy enjoying the silence. Angela grinned. You've turned revenge into an art form. I'm proud. On Christmas Eve, Elaine loaded her car, books, a notebook, cider, a wool blanket, and began the long drive north. The roads were nearly empty, the sky a wide gray sheet. Snowbanks flanked the highway like soft walls, and the closer she got to the lake, the more the world seemed to disappear into white. The cabin was small, perfect. Wood smoke curled from its chimney, and the frozen lake shimmered just beyond the pine trees. Inside, the air was clean and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Elaine built a fire, unpacked her things, and stood by the window with a mug of cider warming her hands. The reflection in the glass was calm, unhurried. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt like that woman, someone with no one to please and nowhere to hurry. When night fell, she didn't turn on the television or play music. She wrote instead. Not about her children, not even about the house. She wrote about the sound of snow falling, about the small courage it takes to choose peace over performance, and about how silence can be a kind of inheritance too. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a lullaby. On Christmas morning, she woke to light pouring through the cabin's frosted windows. The fire had burned down to embers. She brewed another cup of cider, sat in her robe with a blanket across her knees, and read until noon. At one point, her phone buzzed, a single text from Brent. Brent, Merry Christmas, Mom. She smiled and typed back, Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Thank you. There was no reply, but she didn't need one. Hours passed. Snow deepened outside. Elaine cooked a simple dinner, soup and warm bread, nothing fancy, and ate it by the fire with her notebook open beside her. When she finally turned her phone on again, there were no new messages from Kelsey, no calls, no apologies, only silence. And for the first time in her life, that silence felt like a gift. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Elaine stepped outside onto the cabin porch. The lake stretched before her, endless and white, the ice glowing faintly under the moon. She lifted her face to the cold air and whispered, Merry Christmas, Elaine. The words hung in the air like breath before fading into the stillness. The voicemail came on a Thursday evening, 3 days after Christmas, while the fire in Elaine's cabin had burned low and the snow outside glowed blue under the fading light. She didn't hear the call itself. She was upstairs in the loft, reading by lantern light, her mind soft and still. When she came back down, her phone blinked with a single notification. 1. New voicemail. Kelsey. Elaine stared at it for a moment. Then, without hurry, she pressed play. Kelsey's voice filled the room, tentative at first, the kind of careful tone people use when they're not sure whether they're talking to an audience or an empty room. Hey, Mom, I know you're probably, I don't know, busy or whatever. I just wanted to say, I've been thinking. Maybe things got a little out of hand. Elaine stood by the window watching snow gather on the porch railing. She didn't move. You know how the holidays get? Kelsey went on, her voice slipping into that familiar blend of apology and justification. Everyone's tired, everyone's stressed. Dylan's been saying I should just let it go. But I can't pretend it doesn't hurt that you shut us out. I mean, you didn't even tell me you were selling the house. A pause. Then softer, almost rehearsed. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I forgive you. I know things have been weird, and maybe we both said things we didn't mean, but I don't want this to turn into some lifelong grudge. Life's too short for that, right? Everyone's so sensitive lately. Elaine let out a slow exhale, her breath fogging the glass. Kelsey's voice faltered toward the end, reaching for something that wasn't there. Anyway, I hope you're okay. Call me if you want. Or don't. Whatever works for you. Love you, Mom. The message ended with a hollow click. The room went still again, save for the soft crackle of the fire. Elaine didn't delete it. She didn't replay it either. She simply saved it and set the phone face down on the table. Outside, the lake looked endless, white stretching into white. A raven flew low across the frozen surface, its wings slicing through the cold air with effortless grace. Elaine sat at the small wooden desk by the window, opened her journal, and began to write. December 28th. She said she forgives me, as though silence were a sin. She said everyone's sensitive, as though tenderness were a flaw. She said she hopes I'm okay. I am. I think what she wanted was the performance of forgiveness, something tidy, something that could be posted or repeated at dinner tables. But I don't live in performances anymore. I live in peace. And peace is quiet. Elaine paused, tapping the pen lightly against the paper. The ink bled softly into the page like breath disappearing into cold air. She kept writing. If I'd answered, I would have told her that homes can forgive too, that the walls she called outdated had already forgiven her for every slammed door and half-hearted visit. That forgiveness isn't something we announce. It's something we choose, quietly, when we stop trying to make the other person listen. She set the pen down and read over her words once. There was no anger in them, no ache, just stillness. When she closed the notebook, the fire had burned low again. The clock on the wall ticked softly, measuring time she no longer needed to fill. She stood, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and walked to the window. The world outside was vast and empty and perfect. Elaine whispered, I accept your silence too, Kelsey. The words vanished into the glass before she could see them leave her lips. She turned off the light, climbed into bed, and let the cold hum of the winter night fill the room. No tears came. None were needed. The hum of the city returned with the new year. Elaine sat at her favorite corner in Angela's bakery, laptop open, a half-eaten almond croissant beside her. Outside, the sidewalks were slick with melting snow, sunlight reflecting off every puddle like fragments of glass. She had waited for this day, not with dread or hesitation, but with the same quiet certainty she'd once reserved for grading her best student essays. Today was for editing her life. Her inbox pinged. A message from Simon. Subject: Updated will, review, draft before filing. Elaine adjusted her glasses, clicked it open, and began to read. The legal language was dry, but beneath it pulsed the unmistakable heartbeat of intent. She scrolled slowly through the document, every line a deliberate decision, every paragraph a small act of release. Item Y. All physical property and financial assets are to be distributed in accordance with attached directives. Item 2. Executor, Angela Merritt. Item 3. Beneficiaries, Minneapolis Literacy Coalition, Harvest Table Food Access Fund, and North Star Adult Education Initiative. Elaine paused there, sipping her coffee. She could almost hear Angela's voice in her head. You really trust me to handle all this legal mumbo-jumbo? And it made her smile. Of course she did. Angela was the only one who'd never tried to edit her sentences. Further down the page came the personal section. Simon had formatted it with respectful simplicity, exactly as she'd asked. To my son, Brent Morrow. I leave you my journals, the family photos from Maple Crest Drive, And the watch your father gave me on our 10th anniversary. You'll understand someday that not everything worth keeping fits in a bank account. She lingered on that paragraph. Brent would read it and understand, quietly, the way he always did. Then came the final entry. To my daughter, Kelsey Morrow Ward. No bequest. The words were small, stark, legal. Elaine stared at them for a long time. There was no malice in her chest, no thrill of revenge. Only finality, the kind that feels like setting down a heavy box after carrying it too long. She highlighted the line and reread it once more, not to reconsider, but to memorize the stillness it brought. Then she scrolled to the end and clicked, approve. Simon's reply came within minutes. Understood, I'll file it quietly this week. No need for any signatures beyond what we have. Everything is legally airtight. Thank you, Elaine wrote back. This is the first story I've ever finished with no revisions. Angela slid into the chair across from her, setting down 2 steaming lattes. You look like someone who just solved a crossword puzzle made entirely of family drama. Elaine smiled faintly. Something like that. Let me guess. You filed it. I did. Angela took a long sip, watching her carefully. How do you feel? Elaine looked toward the window where people hurried through the slush outside, their coats buttoned tight against the wind. Lighter, she said. And maybe a little empty. But not the bad kind. The kind you get when you've cleaned out a room and can finally hear your own footsteps. Angela nodded slowly. That's a rare kind of peace. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of espresso machines and distant conversation. Then Angela leaned in. You think Kelsey will find out soon? Elaine gave a small shrug. Probably. Simon's too professional to say a word, but news like this has a way of traveling. Someone will ask the wrong question, and she'll get her answer. Angela smiled, almost wickedly. I'd pay to see her face. Elaine shook her head. No, that's the difference now. I don't need to see it. I don't need to win. I just needed to finish. That night, back in her borrowed room above the bakery, Elaine sat at her desk and opened her journal again. The air smelled faintly of yeast and sugar, comfort woven into every corner. She wrote, I didn't remove her to punish her. I removed her because I've learned that inheritance isn't love. It's weight. And I'm done handing down heaviness. She paused, then added, the story's mine again. It always was. I just stopped narrating it out loud. When she closed the journal, the bakery below was dark. She could hear the wind push against the window panes, soft and rhythmic. The world outside was cold, but inside, warmth lingered like a promise. Elaine shut her laptop, the metallic click sounding like the last page of a long novel finally turned. She leaned back in her chair, eyes closed. For the first time, she felt her life had become a finished sentence, punctuated, intentional, hers. It was late afternoon when the knock came, sharp, deliberate, and far too familiar. Angela had left hours ago to make deliveries, leaving the apartment above the bakery quiet except for the hum of the heater and the low murmur of a jazz station playing in the background. Elaine had been sitting at her small desk, editing an essay submission for the Literacy Coalition's upcoming gala, her story, reworked, refined, finally hers. The knock came again, louder this time. Elaine froze for half a heartbeat, her hand hovering over the keyboard. Then she rose and walked to the door, each step unhurried. Through the peephole, she saw a face she hadn't expected to see in person again so soon. Kelsey. Her daughter's coat was immaculate, her makeup barely disturbed by the cold, but her eyes, the same green-gray as her father's, were wild. Elaine's heartbeat didn't quicken. It just steadied, as if preparing for something she'd already survived. Kelsey knocked again, sharper now. Mom, I know you're in there. Angela's van is out front, I saw it. Elaine pressed her forehead lightly against the door, eyes closed. She could hear the controlled panic in Kelsey's voice, the desperate mix of anger and entitlement that had always followed confrontation. Mom, we need to talk, Kelsey said, her voice climbing. This isn't okay. You can't just disappear. You can't just rewrite everything without even... Another knock, harder this time. Elaine stepped back from the door and inhaled slowly. Then she turned, walked toward the kitchenette, and filled the kettle with water. The rhythmic sound of water against metal was grounding, almost musical. Kelsey's voice echoed through the door again. You made a mistake. Whatever that lawyer told you, you can fix it. Just open the door, Mom. Elaine set the kettle on the stove and clicked on the burner. The flame caught with a soft whoosh. She moved to her reading chair, the same faded armchair that had traveled with her through 3 decades, now sitting in Angela's corner nook. She settled into it, tucking her shawl around her shoulders, and waited for the water to boil. Through the walls, the knocking continued, then stopped, then resumed, louder. Mom! Elaine reached for her journal on the side table, its leather cover worn smooth from weeks of daily use. She flipped it open to a clean page and uncapped her pen. January 4th. She began to write. She came to the door today. I saw her face through the glass, looking for the version of me who used to explain, soothe, justify. That woman doesn't live here anymore. She paused, listening to the faint vibration of another knock. I don't open doors out of guilt now, only out of choice. The kettle began to whistle, a soft rising sound that filled the silence between knocks. Elaine stood, turned off the stove, and poured the water over a waiting tea bag. The scent of chamomile bloomed through the small apartment. She carried the cup back to her chair, unbothered by the faint echo of Kelsey's voice on the other side of the door. Mom, please, you can't just ignore me forever. Elaine sipped her tea, her reflection steady in the darkened window. Outside, the snow was falling again, heavy and slow, turning the street below into a quiet blur. She picked up her pen again. There was a time when I thought motherhood meant leaving the door open, no matter how cold the air got. I thought love meant explaining myself until someone understood. But love isn't noise. It's the decision to stay warm. The knocking faded to silence. Then faintly she heard footsteps, heels against the hallway floor, retreating. Elaine let out a long breath. Not relief, exactly. More like arrival. She turned another page in her journal and wrote simply, Today, I chose peace again. She closed the book gently, set it aside, and looked toward the door. Still closed, perfectly still. For a moment she thought she saw movement outside the frosted window, a silhouette passing by on the street below. Maybe Kelsey walking back to her car? Maybe not. It didn't matter. Elaine picked up the remote and turned the music a little louder. Billie Holiday's voice drifting through the air, smooth and forgiving. She took another sip of tea, leaned back in her chair, and smiled to herself. The story she'd been told all her life, that mothers must always open doors, no matter what waited on the other side, was over. And in its place, a new story had begun. The snow had returned, soft and heavy, falling in steady layers that quieted the city's noise. Elaine walked through downtown Minneapolis with a tote bag tucked against her side, her breath visible in the cold air. Inside the bag were pages of her handwriting, recipes, essays, fragments of her life pressed between sheets of cream paper. The Minneapolis Literacy Center sat on the corner of 8th and Marquette, a red brick building that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Inside, the air was warm, alive with the sound of volunteers sorting books and voices echoing down narrow halls. Mrs. Morrow? A woman at the front desk asked, smiling. You're donating your materials today, right? The ones for the community reading project? Elaine nodded, pulling the bag open. A little of everything, she said. Recipes, notes, maybe a few stories disguised as instructions. The woman laughed softly, flipping through the pages. They'll love this. You have beautiful handwriting. It feels lived in. Elaine smiled. It is. She signed a short form, handed over the bag, and left feeling lighter than she'd arrived. 2 weeks later, she attended the community event the center hosted, a winter reading night in their converted library space. The room was full, parents with strollers, teenagers with notepads, older couples holding hands. Steam rose from paper cups of cocoa. Angela sat beside her, coat unbuttoned, hair pinned up in her usual hurry. So they're reading one of your pieces tonight? She whispered. Elaine nodded. Anonymously. Angela grinned. You're going to sit here and watch people cry over your words without telling them you wrote them? That's delicious. Quiet revenge, Elaine said, sipping her cocoa. Your term, not mine. The lights dimmed. A young volunteer walked up to the podium, a printout in her hands. This next piece, the woman said, was submitted without a name. It's called Feeding What's Left. Angela glanced sideways at Elaine, eyes bright. The young woman began to read. Some stories aren't meant to be told at tables that don't want to listen. Some stories are meant to be cooked into the air, stitched into the silence, folded into dough and memory. I learned that a recipe is a love letter, one that asks for nothing back but time. For 31 years, I fed everyone but myself. Now I'm learning how to eat in peace. The room was still. You could hear the rustle of coats, the sound of someone swallowing hard in the back row. To every woman who's ever been told she talks too much, remembers too much, feels too much, keep talking, keep remembering, feel everything. You don't owe silence to anyone who mistakes it for respect. When the reading ended, a few young mothers in the front row wiped tears from their cheeks. One whispered, "That's me." Another clapped quietly, reverently. Angela reached for Elaine's hand under the table. "Queen," she whispered, voice thick, "absolute queen of quiet revenge." Elaine smiled, a small curve of her lips, nothing more. The applause was gentle but real. It filled the room like warmth spreading from a small flame. After the event, as people mingled, a familiar voice called from behind her. "Mom." Elaine turned. Brent stood there in a wool coat, his expression calm, almost proud. "I saw the flyer online," he said. "I thought I'd surprise you." "You did," she said softly. They found a quiet corner near the exit, watching snow swirl outside the tall windows. "I read the story," he said. "They didn't say it was yours, but I knew." Elaine looked at him carefully. "What did you think?" He smiled. "I think you finally said everything you needed to." She touched his arm. The gesture brief but grounding. "And you finally listened." He nodded. "I did." Later that evening, back in her small apartment, Elaine poured herself a cup of coffee. Angela had gone home. Brent had offered to drive her. She declined. And the city was quiet again. She sat in her reading chair, journal open to its last blank page. The pen felt heavier than usual, but steady in her hand. January 28th. They read my story tonight. They didn't know it was mine, and that's what made it perfect. The words didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to everyone who needed to hear them. She paused, looking toward the window. Snow fell under the glow of the streetlight, each flake turning like slow confetti. I used to think revenge was loud. Turns out, it's quiet. It's peace that looks like defiance when no one expects you to have it. She set the pen down, exhaled softly, and closed the journal for the last time. Outside, a lone car passed, its tires hissing against the snow. The sound faded quickly, leaving only stillness behind. Elaine lifted her coffee cup in a small private toast. To her home, her voice, her freedom. And with a faint, knowing smile, she whispered her final line aloud, the one she'd already written across the last page. I ate in silence. Then I fed my soul instead.